This is Third Paradigm, and I'm Teresa Carraggio. My topic today is the Tonic Gnostic. This is another in the series on tonic masculinity. One of the fine authors that's been writing about this is Luc Koch, who does Luc Talks. He is a German living in France who introduces his blog with, "The world has gone bonkers. It is increasingly difficult not to fall into despair, black and white thinking, and nihilism. Like many others, I have come to the conclusion that the only way forward is to reconnect with long lost, or at least culturally suppressed, spiritual and philosophical perspectives." Luc's episodes include his most popular, How to Grow Your Soul. And then he starts his one on what is tonic masculinity with, "There has been a big trend on Substack lately to discuss the concept of tonic masculinity as opposed to the toxic masculinity of culture war fame. See the post by Jay Rollins, John Carter, or Harrison Coley. Let's join the fray." Luke sees biological drives and appetites as influencing and limiting our self-expression. Yet it's also an access point, he says, to the higher realms. He writes, "A good relationship, therefore, is one in which both partners work towards aligning themselves with the higher, using their biological bodies as a gateway, a springboard to access reality in their own male or female styles. As a consequence, they will work together as a team towards a common goal, each in their own way, and support each other reaching a higher level." Some red pillars might object that this sounds kinda unmanly. But look at it this way. Supporting your woman in her soul development doesn't mean meekly going along with everything. It requires serious demon slaying. For when you are weak and fragmented, that is, slave to your inner demons and cut off from the higher realm, you will push back against her for pathetic emotional reasons, and you will not push back out of weakness when the situation requires it. You'll be the helpless reaction machine. You'll get everything wrong, and you won't be the man she needs who can protect and inspire her. Clear away those monsters with your shining sword, and you'll be on the right track towards actualizing the higher masculine principle. I've been giving some thought to what tonic masculinity is opposed to because I think there's been an emphasis on masculinity versus femininity rather than tonic versus toxic. But the toxic masculinity of the culture wars, I think we all agree, is a manipulation that's designed to divide and conquer us, to get in policies with a female face that are toxic for all of us. In Sacred Masculine, my episode on William Hunter Duncan, I quote from Peter Linebaugh in the foreword to Re-Enchanting the World by Sylvia Federici, who is a feminist. He writes, "A neoliberal feminism has emerged that accepts market rationalities and sees the ceiling rather than the hearth as the symbolic center of its architecture and the ladder rather than the round table as its furniture." Maybe that neoliberal feminism is the same thing that Luke is referring to as toxic feminism. To take a stab at defining toxic, which of course means poison, maybe that is domination, power over others. If we looked at it that way, neoliberalism itself could be the female version of control through monetary means. And then you have the neoconservatism, which is the masculine form of military control. But either way, it's the velvet glove over the iron fist. Either one has the same objective of domination over others. Within relationships, there are certainly power dynamics with violence at one extreme. I know a mother who, for 12 years, allowed herself to be beaten in order to protect the kids, until she finally left and the Solano court gave him full custody. I can't imagine anything that's more horrible than living with someone that you're afraid of in order to protect your kids, unless it's not being able to protect them at all. And I have the link to show in my Substack that the Solano court is notorious for that, and I recommend that you check it out. But as Jay Rollins quoted in a beautifully vulnerable and honest post, hurt people hurt people. That doesn't make them toxic. If I go back to my original definition when I coined tonic masculinity, it was a world that puts children at the center, surrounded by women, surrounded by men. I believe that the purpose of our lives is to care for the people and the places that have been entrusted to us. But in order to do that, we have to serve the bankers who own the houses because they've usurped the right to create the mortgages and therefore our money system. So this is a toxic system that forces us all to work for it, that puts the oligarchs in the center, and men, women, and children alike all serve them. It uses our love against us. What does Luc mean by red pillars? He explains this in Red Pilled in Disneyland, which is subtitled The True Meaning of Gnostic Liberation, or Escaping This World is Not About Shutting Out the World. He writes, Transcendence means seeing the unseen as reflected in the material world, not overcoming the material world by declaring it irrelevant. It means paying more attention to reality, not less, with the mind firmly oriented towards the higher and the lower worlds simultaneously. But the way to it is through it, not out of it. When we are in a dark tunnel, laying down and dreaming of the light won't do. We must actually move towards the light, which means we must pay strict attention to the tunnel's topography. I love that description. What I call socio-spirituality is looking with open eyes at the reality in the world while questioning the reality of the world. The spiritual grounding allows you to look without fear so you can really see. If this is a collective dream, a possibility that I entertain, the only way out is through, is by turning this into a dream that we're not afraid to wake up from. As Luc says, it means you pay more attention because what's here is the reflection of the unseen, and you need to understand the topography of that tunnel. I once wrote a poem called Mystic Currents that says, a mystic is a cartographer mapping the ocean floor from the surface ripples. We are all born prophets. To see the future is no more than seeing the present clearly. Expect prophecy within your own home. Listen closer. A moment lived in the awareness of death is a speck of infinity exploding. The answer to the conundrum, to be fully human, is to be fully divine. Some months ago, before the Tonic Masculinity brouhaha, Luc responded to Matt Walsh's film, What is a Woman? He writes, the word woman, just as the word man and other words that have a long and somewhat consistent past and are connected to the very core of life, are not mere symbols that stand for an object, as the impoverished and naive modern understanding of language would have it. They express not only a whole world, but a whole universe. They can't be defined. A dictionary doesn't help. And yet their meaning, to any sane person with a soul, couldn't be clearer. We risk losing the bottomless richness of our intuitive, nonverbal understanding of what a woman is. The kind of knowledge that is as sure as it gets, and because of that, cannot be expressed in words. In short, we risk losing the history of the entire cosmos, our connection to the infinite depth of our existence, to every experience we have from cradle to grave, to our entire history, society, dreams, drives, feelings, aspirations, our connection to something higher, above our whims, to true love. I'm not going to attempt to improve on that. Last Sunday, Luc wrote a deep and insightful post on perception, both sensory and what we call extrasensory. He looks at it as a dialogue, if I'm understanding correctly, between the conscious thinking mind and the higher mind, for which all that is a reflection. He writes, "Just as we perceive thoughts and feelings without, we perceive thoughts and feelings within. But the source of those thoughts and feelings is not entirely clear. It might not be us in a sense, and even if it is us, the question is, what is us? If during self-observation our conscious eye can perceive thoughts and feelings that another eye seems to create, and this other eye apparently has some information that the conscious eye doesn't have, where exactly does this information come from? We seem to connect to communicate with something. We might as well call it higher. This seems obvious enough when we think of inspiration. Countless artists and writers have described the process of manifesting inspiration during moments of profound, blissful, creative activity in the zone as a sort of collaboration. Whole creative chunks seem to come down the pipeline, and the artist's job is to map those unto their own understanding, their own experience. The ideas and inspiration may come from without, but the formulation, the execution, and the connections between various concepts comes from us. In this post, he mentions Rudolf Steiner, which the higher mind definitely wants to bring to my attention. On my last episode of Nord Streams and the Bagel of Doom, Michael Fuller commented, "I am particularly struck and delighted, strange quality I know, that you and Michael Hudson point out the fact that the U.S. and the West have spent most of their waking lives since 1900 trying to destroy Germany. This resonates with the deeper thought from Rudolf Steiner, that the reason they do this is to prevent Germany and Russia from working together into the future to help bring about a more spiritual, more brotherly epic. I'm sorry this is so shorthand. Please ask if you want specific details of Steiner's ideas, 6,000 lectures, 50 books." However, in a nutshell, he suggests that for this kind, brotherly, earth-respecting spiritual impulse to succeed, it will need those of us in the West who can see through the mind games of the Western military-industrial complex to inwardly and outwardly support the idea of this Middle Europe Slavic future epic. This means, amongst much else, looking within ourselves and allowing kindness, humility, and openness to grow, qualities which you reference beautifully at the end of the essay when you speak of the film. And then the books that Michael referenced were Steiner's 26 lectures on World War I that were given in 1916 and are captured in 2 volumes called The Karma of Untruthfulness. And I am eager to dig in and do an episode on that. Today, Luc's post was about 5 theories of human nature. He writes, "For decades now, we have witnessed a push towards the idea that humans are fundamentally good at heart. The massive international bestseller, Humankind by Rutger Bregman, even goes as far as trying and failing to debunk the Milgram experiments and other important works showing that, well, pure goodness certainly isn't the one and only feature of humanity." His first 4 theories are Hobbes, Adam Smith, Freud, and Rousseau's Noble Savage. The last are Dabrowski and Lobaczewski, if I'm pronouncing that right, and that's who Harrison Coley is analyzing in his political ponerology. He says that we have different starting points, potential for growth, and degrees of actualization. He writes, In this picture, we recognize that humans are neither fundamentally good nor evil. Rather, there exists a spectrum. Some, like clinical psychopaths, are close to being fundamentally evil. Others seem to be virtuous almost from the start. Most of us fall somewhere in between. That is, some of us have little potential for developing virtue, while others do. But even those of us who do have this potential not always realize it, because it requires both motivation and hard work. Mustering both is so difficult, in fact, that it almost always requires going through transformative crises and hurtful realizations to break us out of our stupor and supercharge our motivation for change. Traditionally, this process has been framed in terms of spiritual development, growing closer to the divine through sudden illumination until we see ourselves utterly transformed, when the divine spirit affects the totality of our lives and experiences. We bring every aspect of our existence under the umbrella of higher principles. Everything will be ordered according to the divine spark. The premise of my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, is that people are inherently good, and when they behave badly, systems are to blame. In the Milgram experiment, normal people were put in a situation of inflicting pain where there was a normalization of that by an authority figure, and there was also the pressure to inflict more. And so I think it actually contradicts Lobaczewski, because what it shows is that you can take anyone and put them in that situation, and in that situation, they will exhibit what's maybe cruelty and what's maybe too much obedience. I think the Stanford prison experiment proved that even further, because it was a random selection of who were guards and who were prisoners. And what it showed was that if you take the same random selection of people, but put them in that situation of absolute dominance, that they will exhibit that same cruelty. So it's not whether someone was born psychopathic or virtuous at the beginning. It's what was the situation that they're placed in. And when we see some people as more virtuous than others, then we're confirming that a system of domination should rightly exist, because we should be dominated by our betters. I'd like to ask Luc, who created some of those babies as future psychopaths and some of those babies as future Gandhis? Is that something that you would say about your kid? Oh, yeah, that one. Just a bad egg. Nothing we could do about it. Just born that way. In my episodes on the theodicy triangle, I call this a belief in God the monster, a God who created some evil people and some good people, some with limited potential and some with great, some who never touch the divine and others who will illuminate the divine spark. I call myself a Gnostic because I believe that God, truth, reality, 3 words for the same thing, wants to be known. That I know for myself as a parent, I want my kids to know me, and I want to create them better than perfect. And I don't see why God would be less loving than I am. So that's a month of Sundays from Luc Talks, which I recommend to everyone as deep philosophical questions approached with an open mind and an open heart. I'm going to follow this up with Muskrat Love and Anarchy on David Graeber and David Wengrow's book, The Dawn of Everything, where anthropology refutes Hobbes, Freud, and Rousseau. And then also the Theodicy Triangle on Alistair McGrath. Thank you for watching, and check out Substack.